Good morning, everyone. It is Dr. Tracy Shroyer, and I not only want to say happy Wednesday, but happy St. Patrick's Day. I got my shirt all ready for the day, even though I'm not leaving the house. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you who celebrate the holiday. I know a lot of people in my family, I come from a large Irish Catholic family. It's a wonderful day, and we used to be able to get together and celebrate and watch the parades downtown and everything like that. So hopefully you have a great day and you're staying safe. Today on UPSCO Live, I want to continue the discussion. This week is about graduate student tips and best practices for studies. So today I actually want to take you into the databases, the search databases, when you're going to do research and show you some different tips and tricks on what you can do. Now, I'm going to take you into the research databases that I have access to. Wherever you are, whatever school you're in, that may be different. A lot of them base it off of that first layer that you look into is EBSCOhost. That's a common one that they use, that universities use, and there's multiple other databases that they can subscribe to. So my research results are not going to be the same as what you get because everybody's are different. Now, one question I have heard over and over is, after you graduate, do you still have access to these? Some universities provide limited access to their alumni. Others may not provide any. A lot of these databases, the universities may pay a lot of money to access those and use those. So you may have to be a student. Hopefully, alumni, they do give you some access to those. Or if you become a professor, you're able to access those as well. You could get a lot of great information. And I know one of the things that's the most difficult, especially if you've been out of school or you're just starting into a program, even if it's an undergrad or graduate program, it's overwhelming to go into these databases and to try to figure out, how do you find what you need? You type in a search term and you get millions of responses. How do you narrow that down a little bit more? So I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks that I have used throughout my graduate studies and that I continue to use today to help students to locate information. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And let me put this over here. Okay, so on my screen, you'll see the access to the databases that I have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type in leadership development, and you'll see it already, kind of like Google does. It'll pop up common lists, terms, and publications. So I'm going to type that first one, click the search button. Now, what I'm going to do is, if you can see here, it's 5.3 million results. Nobody has time for that. So how do you find what you're going to need? So let me make this up. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. I'm actually going to go off screen so you can see my screen better. There we go. Okay, so what you'll notice is along the top, these are all the same no matter where you're located. You'll have this drop down for keyword, and you could do keyword, title, author. Depending on where you are, you might have a multiple items here. Another thing that you can do is, if you don't, you can type in advanced search and you get multiple layers here. So I can type in leadership development, and I actually want this to show up in, let's say I want it to show up in the title. So I want leadership development to be in the title. So let's see what that narrows it down to. We do the search, 25,000. We went from 5.3 million down to 25,000. So from there, we can continue to narrow it more. So maybe we want to, I'm going to leave this spot up here, and you have more search abilities on your left-hand menu. And these are all fairly similar from different universities that I've seen. So you have the ability to limit to only full text, which I always suggest doing, because the worst thing is finding an article or a book or something like that, and you can't even access it. Available in the library collection. Most of the time, I believe this is if you want to be able to request, like if it's a physical book or a magazine or a journal that you have a physical copy of that you can get. And most universities can mail that to you. You have it for a certain number of days, like a library book, and then you return it. I typically don't do that, or catalog only. So I do full text. The other one that's really helpful is narrowing down your publication date. So my search term is leadership development, and it's always in the title because of how I listed it. But it's pulling things from 1950 all the way to 2021. What if my paper, I want to focus more and not on the initial theory of leadership development, which would probably be back here in the 50s, but I want to talk about over the last maybe decade. So we could put in here 2011, and I'll just hit tab, and you see that moves this over here. So you can narrow your search in the years from where it's going to be. So let me, just with that full text and publication date, let me scroll back up here. I actually go over to my other screen here. Scroll back up, it's doing a search. Now you'll see it brings me down to 8,600. Keeps popping me down, 8,600. So let's continue down on this left side menu. So we narrowed it down to the last 10 years. We said full text. You can also look at the types of sources that you use. Most of the time, I don't use reviews or conference materials. If you're looking just for basic information, you can definitely include those. I would typically not include reviews. Unless you're looking for a short and sweet to find a book related to a topic, then you can find reviews and then go find the book that they're doing the review on. But typically what I'll do is I'll check academic journals, and you can see in here that narrows me down even from my 8,600 down to my 4,100. So we have, in a matter of just a couple minutes, been able to narrow from 5.3 million items that we search for, 5.3 million items down to 4,100. So that's still quite a bit. So let's go in here and see if you know if there's a certain publication that you're looking for. You can always click on this and it'll give you some examples of different journals that are listed. So you'll see like the Journal of Leadership Education. If you're focusing on leadership development within the education field, that may be important to you, and that'll narrow you down to 132 items. Journal of Management Development gets me down to 84 items, so you can see how that can help you narrow it further. If you know the publisher, which I believe most of the time, unless you're looking for something specific or you know of a couple different publishers that you want to search across, you could use that. I would say from my perspective, I had not heavily used publisher, just from what the studies that I've done. If you want certain languages, you can definitely, so if I just want to bring back things in English, that brings me down from my 4,100, drops me a couple hundred, or maybe 100 more, so 3,900. So let me check that. I'll come back up to the subject here in a minute. So we did the language, geography. So this is important if you are looking at leadership development in a certain geography and it's not related to global overall. So if you don't want to bring back studies in other countries, you can narrow it more here. And there is good and bad in doing this. I wouldn't encourage your initial searches to do this, because you do want to see where your topic, and especially if you're going to narrow even more than leadership development, maybe add another search term with it, where studies like that are done. So I can tell you that when I did my PhD, worked on my dissertation study, I looked at downsizing, and I found a lot of articles about downsizing survivors and downsizing employees in the United States, but I found a lot about downsizing from a manager's perspective, which was the focus of my dissertation, done outside of the United States. There were a limited amount done within the US, So if I would have limited my search in the very beginning to say just the United States, I wouldn't have seen those and I would have missed out on that opportunity. So I would caution when you're using this, how you're going to use it and how you want to go about that. Don't close down your study too much. Then the other point in here is subject. This one has been kind of interesting to play around with in the past. You could do the show me more. It gives you a ton of different, so leadership by itself, of course, you're going to get a lot back. Like I said, if you have a specific subtopic related to leadership development, you can search in here and find out if there's anything specific. So if we look in here, let's say leadership development, and you can do a focus, let's say coaching. You have 55, and I'll do mentoring also. Sometimes those are used similarly and sometimes they're not. So let me do an update here. Okay, so that brings us down to 133 items. And you'll see in here when you go to look at the items, they give you the name. I asked for leadership development in the title. What I would recommend is if you have a topic, you don't always have to have it in the title. And some studies do not, and especially if it could be worded several different ways. What I would typically do when I went in to do research is instead of having it in the title, I would ask to have it in the abstract. You could start out having it in the text, which is a bigger return, and then narrow it down even further so it's in your abstract. And in the abstract of papers, typically gives you insight as to if there are other terminology used. And I know some of my students, if you're listening, we have talked about operational definitions in the past or key terms, things like that. A lot of times those, if they're prevalent in the article, they'll be mentioned in the abstract. So the abstract would be a good place to put that. Definitely, if you put it in the title, it will help you narrow it down more, but you could also miss some opportunities. So just want to bring that up to you. So then when you see the item here, you'll see the different ways that it's available. And then from here, you would typically go to PDF full text. Click that. And it will bring it up for you. Sometimes there are limitations on how much you can print or save. So if you're looking at a chapter of a book, there may be a limit to the number of pages. So you would have to really find within the book or within the article, if it won't let you print the entire thing, what information that you wanted to take from it. And what you'll want to do too is when you find the information you want to take from it, I would always recommend printing that first page because it gives you the title, it gives you the authors, and then typically in the footer, it will give you the information about where it's from. So the journal information, where it's published, to help you write that whether it's APA or MLA format, I know a lot of listeners would probably be using. So make sure that you capture that information because the hardest thing ever is you find gold, you find valuable information to use for your study, and you can't figure out where it was. You try to go back and find it. So I would always make sure to do that. And a simple thing that you could do is either take a picture with your phone. I remember doing my studies, I had lots of pictures of papers or articles on my phone, or even to snip a picture of it if you're not able to print it or save it as a PDF. So typically a lot of the databases, once you pull up information over here on the side, it'll give you options of what you can do. So you can print, you can email. Sometimes when you email, I believe it may not necessarily email like a PDF of it, but it'll email you the link. So you could come back to the database and get it later. So if you know that you're not going to have access to this database at a later date and you're trying to save this article to look at, after that time, I would be cautious of that because that'll probably send you the link. You can also save it, create a folder within your database. So if you're signed into it, which you can see it doesn't show that I'm signed in here. You can save it in a folder and have multiple items within your folder. The other thing that's really nice in here is you can cite. But let me click on this and I'll show you a couple of things. So the citation format comes up, and this is more with this EBSCOhost. There are other database search places that will allow you to pull things up. And you can find where it says APA. There's also MLA under here. The nice thing is you can export to, if you have any of the software. I used EndNote when I was working on my dissertation to save my references. And I still had to tweak them a little bit. I know a lot of people, especially if you're in your doctoral studies, you're probably using one of these to track your different citations and be able to keep some additional notes there. So this gives you all different types of formats. And you'll see in here, so here is the format for the APA. And let me see where that is. Hold on just a second here. Okay. I thought there was a way, and I can't find it right now, but I thought there was a way to export it. So you could actually copy and paste, because I don't see that right now. I believe there is a way, though, you could choose to export that. So you can copy and paste this. The one thing I warn you about is do not take that this is truth. You need to double check your references and make sure that they're formatted correctly. I've seen numerous times where they're loaded incorrectly within these databases, and then students were like, well, I put it exactly how it was in the database, and there's all capital letters for the article name. So you definitely need to confirm that it is in the right format and that the capitalization, the italicizing is correct and the order and everything is correct, that all of the information is in here. So that is what I would note about that. So then you have a couple other options down here as well. So those are some popular things as far as pulling up your article, looking at it, being able to cite it, and all of the ways that you can search around the left-hand side. So let me go back to the result list. So what you can see is that in those changes to the way that we searched, not even the words that we used, the words that you use will take you even further in to what you're looking for. And we kind of did that with the subject. We added coaching and mentoring. So doing something like that could bring you back some similar results. So we started out with 5.3 million results just from looking at leadership development. Then we continued to scale down with the full text on the side. You can see them all here. So we did the full text. We did the last 10 years. We focused it on just academic journals. I wanted it to be in the English language, and then the mentoring and coaching. The other option there that you may choose to look at was the geography, and I would be a little bit cautious about that at first, but maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into that eventually. So just these took us from 5.3 million down to 133 results. And so that is a little bit more reasonable to go through and see what we want. And you could even bring that down a little bit further by adding in things that you want in here. The other nice thing is when you do an advanced search, you can do or and you can do not. So if you know that you want something about leadership development, but you do not want it to have a certain term, you could put and you do not want whatever in the title and the text and the abstract, whatever that might be. So this is really just basic searching, kind of a searching 101 within your library databases. And hopefully that helps you. I would ask that you drop a comment and let me know if you have any other search tips when you're using your database and looking for information, anything that's been really helpful for you. Or if you try any of these tips and they were helpful, please drop me a note and I would love to hear. So thank you all for joining today, and I will see you tomorrow for some more tips.